Welcome, everybody. Good to see you here tonight on this live stream on X. I hope you're here live. Maybe you're watching this somewhere else. Tonight's a very special night. We're going to release the details of my forthcoming book. I'm completely tangled in cables here. Let me eradicate that. And we're going to dive into more about identifying the testing. You know, we spoke last week. We've never really, well, I guess we have done back-to-back studies, but this is a little bit different because we did a study on the tester last week, the temptation of Jesus that we find in Matthew 4 and Luke 4. But we didn't really identify the tester. Now, we saw the evidence there that the tester is Yahweh, but there's something else that I noticed after we did that study, and I want to bring that to your attention tonight. It's very interesting stuff. And we're going to get into the details of the book. So, in fact, we'll get into some of the details of the book right away because I know that you're all waiting for it, but we'll come back to some of this at the end, okay? So, we have a new book coming, and it releases November 5, 2025. November 5, 2025. So, in just less than 6 months' time. What is it about? It is about lifting up Jesus to the world. It is about ending the blasphemy of Abba, the Father, and it is the beginning of a new systematic theology. Who is the audience of this book? It is every soul, every single soul, and that's why the cost is free. You can read this free online, and it won't be just like loading a PDF. It'll be a beautiful website where you can switch between languages. We will have Spanish and French by the end of November, maybe at launch day. We'll just see how we're going with time. We're totally on schedule right now, so it should be fine. And then we will expand into Portuguese and other languages across the world. And so we'll probably do the top 20 languages across the world. The title, we'll leave that. We'll leave that to the end. Okay, so a little bit later, we will go back over this and we'll explore the title and we'll take a look at the cover of the book as well. So it's an exciting time to be releasing a book. Now, I wanted to read some stuff from Augustine because people that are of Catholic or Orthodox faiths and other faiths as well that you've kind of branched off. I mean, all Christianity is branched off from Catholicism, from Orthodoxy. They'll argue over who is the true church, as all cults do. But Augustine is the church father, right? He is considered the father of the church fathers. Nobody has had more influence on forming Christianity than Augustine. But some of these people have said that what I'm showing you has no connection to the Exodus at all. Well, it's all connected to the Exodus. I think that's very, very clear. But let's see what Augustine had to say about this. Augustine recognized the Exodus frame. Augustine is the most influential church father in Western theology. Among all the early Christian writers, Augustine's influence on doctrine is unmatched. His views shaped Roman Catholic theology, Protestant reformers, and Western Christianity's view of God, grace, and salvation. He is not a fringe thinker by any stretch of the imagination. He is the cornerstone of theological tradition. His observations carry weight, even when his conclusions fall short. And I just had to put my heater on here because the temperature dropped really quickly. So I'm just controlling that here on my side. And let's continue here. Augustine saw the temptation as a legal replay of the Exodus. I'm not in conflict with Augustine here. Now, we're talking about more than Augustine saw, but he understood this was a legal exchange that mirrored the Exodus. In his commentaries, Augustine recognized that Jesus' 40 days in the wilderness mirrored Israel's 40 years in the desert. He argued that Jesus, by resisting the devil, was walking the path that Israel failed to walk. He treated the temptation as a real trial with real stakes, not as symbolic drama or private devotion. This confirms that the structure of the temptation is meant to be read as a retelling of the covenant testing in the wilderness. This is Augustine, okay? This supports the legal continuity of the testing system. If Jesus is reenacting Israel's wilderness failure, then the identity of the tester must match. Yahweh tested Israel by hunger, by fear, and by covenant condition. Augustine did not challenge that, he assumed it. By affirming the Exodus pattern, Augustine indirectly confirms that Jesus is standing before the same tester. He simply never asked the question, who is Jesus confronting? So this study completes what Augustine left unfinished. Augustine recognized the Exodus structure beneath the temptation narrative, but he never explored its full implications. He did not consider that the one testing Jesus might be the same one who tested Israel. Nor did he frame Jesus' mission as a legal confrontation with the covenant itself. He acknowledged the pattern, but not the identity of the accuser. This work picks up where Augustine stopped and follows the logic to its necessary conclusion. So, to those of you that are in Orthodox Catholic faiths and any other faith that leans heavily on the Church Fathers, this is what Augustine saw. This is what I saw when I looked at the temptation story and started to dig in. I'm not the first to see that the temptation story is a legal encounter, a legal confrontation. And that confrontation can only occur with the lawgiver, not a stand-in. So we're going to go through a little bit of some details here tonight. And I've got a lot here. We're not going to go through all of this. I've got a lot here. In fact, the whole lot is actually closed up. Because what I've found in going through this study is, we're talking about the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. So this is important in many ways because this sets the context for everything that happens after. Jesus said himself he didn't come to abolish the law, he came to fulfill it. And that's often used by my critics who say, well, you're wrong, obviously, because Jesus said he came to fulfill the law. No, that's what I teach. That's right. Jesus came to fulfill the law. That's important. He's come to fulfill Yahweh's law. My critics say, well, Yahweh is the Father, but that's not the case here. The Father leads Jesus to be tested by Yahweh. So as we start to get into some of the preliminaries of this, there might be a little repetition here with last week, but this is important. This is going to expand and expand because this is the beginning of a legal trial that Jesus is enduring, not just here, but through his entire ministry, where he is required to fulfill Yahweh's law. And Moses and Elijah are the two witnesses, the law and the prophets, that will determine, they're the two witnesses as required by Yahweh's law, to determine if Jesus truly fulfilled the law. And some will say, well, he broke the law here or he broke the law there. That will be up to Moses and Elijah to testify, not us. But we can take Jesus at his word, can we not? That Jesus said he came to fulfill the law. And that's the end of the matter. Jesus said it himself. So there's no real contesting that unless you don't listen to Jesus. So we will dig in here a little bit and we'll start to see that not only can we identify the tester through the actions of the tester, but through the very fact that the only one that can test Jesus here is the tester, is Yahweh. Only the one who issued the covenant can challenge somebody on the covenant. And everything here mirrors what Yahweh did to the Hebrews. Their tests are now Jesus' tests. And where they failed, Jesus is victorious. So let's begin here with this introduction. Why this story matters. The temptation of Jesus is not about resisting sin. This is the common thing that Christians will say. It is a legal trial, a covenantal confrontation between Jesus and the one who holds authority over the kingdoms of the world. The question is not whether Jesus will behave morally, but whether he will submit to or overturn Yahweh's authority. The Christian assumption, the deceiver is the tester. Okay. Most Christians assume the tester is the deceiver, but Jesus never calls him a liar, never rebukes him, and never questions his authority. He responds only with Yahweh's Torah law. This makes no sense if the tester is a deceiver, but it does if the tester is the author of the law. The challenge, what if the tester is Yahweh? The temptation is not an isolated story, but the legal replay of the covenant Yahweh made with Moses, now confronted, resisted, and fulfilled by Abba's son. The tester makes covenantal offers, quotes Yahweh's own promises, and stands in the role that Yahweh alone has historically held. This gets rather deep as we begin to explore all the evidence. You'll see that it simply can't be anyone but Yahweh. And we can determine that through multiple different ways, as we did last week, and now we're adding more to it this week, which is going to make the temptation story, one of the most important stories in the entire Bible, because it identifies who the tester is. And of course, Christian says, well, it's Satan, and it says Satan in the text. In the Matthew version, it says, that it's Jesus calls the tester Satan, the adversary. Yes, because they are one and the same. They're not two different individuals. So, foundations of the argument. Jesus came to fulfill the law. Jesus came under the law, not above it. He did not abolish it, he completed it. The temptation was not a side event, it was a required confrontation with the covenant's enforcer. Jesus' obedience had to be tested by the one who gave the law. That was Yahweh. Israel was tested by Yahweh in the wilderness. Deuteronomy 8:2 makes it explicit. Yahweh tested Israel through hunger, waiting to see what was in their hearts. He designed the trial. If Jesus is walking Israel's path, he must face the same tester. And that tester was never the deceiver. It was Yahweh. Now, of course, when we'll talk here about the Christian Satan, and we're talking about here the caricature that Christianity has developed of this Satan, altogether separate from Yahweh, because they don't accept that at all. And when we're talking about the deceiver here, well, the deceiver also is Yahweh, but we're talking about, again, the Christian stereotype, the Christian caricature. So just be mindful of that. Jesus reenacts Israel's path step by step. Jesus' 40 days match Israel's 40 years and Moses' 40 days with Yahweh without food or water. Each test he faces mirrors Israel's covenant failures: food, fear, and loyalty. His replies come only from Deuteronomy, the covenant law. This is not symbolic. It's a legal retesting, and the person behind it is the same. The temptation is a covenantal trial, not a moral struggle. The temptation is often mistaken for a personal battle with sin or a deceiver, but the text frames it legally. Jesus responds only with covenant law. This is not about desire, it is about a contract. A trial needs a judge. A test requires covenant authority. Under the law, that role belongs only to Yahweh. The Christian Satan does not speak like a covenant lawgiver. The tester speaks in legal terms. He makes jurisdictional claims, offers contracts, and quotes scripture. This is not how Satan behaves anywhere in the Gospels. Satan deceives, he corrupts, but here the figure speaks with authority and is answered with Torah. He does not act like the Christian Satan. He acts like Yahweh. Yahweh alone gave the law and tested Israel. The law did not come from the Christian Satan. It came from Yahweh. The promises of land, blessing, and punishment all flow from Yahweh's covenant. He declares himself the tester, the enforcer, and the judge. No other figure carries that role. If Jesus is under covenant trial, he is facing the covenant's author, Yahweh. Therefore, only Yahweh can test Jesus under that law. If Jesus came to fulfill the law, then the tester must be the one who issued it. The Christian Satan has no standing to test Jesus under terms he didn't create. Only Yahweh can do that. The structure of the trial, bread, dominion, protection, mirrors Yahweh's covenant. Jesus responds with Yahweh's law, not rebuke. That only makes sense if the tester is Yahweh. So, as I said, we're not going to go through all of this here tonight because, as you saw when we zoomed out here, or zoom out again for anyone who just joined us, there's a lot here, and we'll be here for literally 2.5 hours if we are going to go through all of that. But we'll go through enough so that you can, hopefully dive into the text. We might just read through the text here ourselves in a little bit and see what it's all saying here. In fact, should we do that now? Let's do that now before continuing. Maybe I should have done that right at the beginning. So we understand the story here and we have it in our mind. But I want you to go and start to look at this. And you need to read this. It's not a long passage, right? Let me get my cursor on the right screen. So this is it. We've got 13 verses. Well, I encourage you to go and read this. It doesn't really matter the translation. And, really dissect it. And first of all, read it 10 times. It won't take you long. It won't take you more than, 5 minutes to read it 10 times. Because each time you read it, you're going to see more and more there. That's exactly what happened to me last week. I'd done this study, so I thought, and I sat back and was looking at some things, and I went, wait, no, there's more here. The only one that can administer these tests and have them be valid and have Jesus treat them as being valid is Yahweh, nobody else. So let's read through these 13 verses together. Then Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan River and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where for 40 days he endured temptations from the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and when they were completed, he was famished. Well, in those two verses, it's completely set up for the Exodus. This is a retelling of the Exodus story right here. So the two verses that lead into the tests are providing us the context. What is the context? The context is the Exodus journey. So he returned from the Jordan River. So he's just gone through the waters of baptism, just like the Hebrews went through the waters of the Red Sea. It was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, just like Yahweh led the Hebrews into the wilderness, where for 40 days he endured temptations from the devil, just as the Hebrews endured 40 years of testing from the devil, Yahweh. He ate nothing during those days, and when they were completed, he was famished. And the whole story of the Exodus is about, food deprivation. The people are starving. They're being dehydrated. 6 weeks after leaving Egypt, they cried out and they said, "We know he's led us here into the desert to kill us." But it was the ultimate strength test. This is a way of thinning the herd and leaving behind just the absolute strongest of all the people. Verse 3, then the devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God," now, and that relates back to, I think I talk about it here, we'll get to it, but this relates back to the baptism, where Abba Father's voice could be heard declaring, "This is my Son." So now he's saying, if you are the Son of God, which means what? Probably that he was there at the baptism. Remember, Yahweh is a physical person, not some disembodied spirit. And here is John baptizing people, and you've got religious leaders starting to come to John to be baptized. You remember what he said to those people when they came, "Who told you to repent, you brood of vipers?" So it would be natural for Yahweh to be there watching his people, seeing who was going to be baptized by John. "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread." This, of course, echoes the whole thing in the wilderness. Jesus answered him, "It is written, man does not live by bread alone." And we'll unpack this as we go back to the mind map, but a lot of people get caught up on, well, hang on, he's quoting Yahweh. Are you saying he's quoting Yahweh to Yahweh? Yes, of course. If you're in a legal battle against a legal opponent, and you're bound by a certain law, then yes, you're going to, and someone's trying to pin you down and say, well, you've broken the law, or get you to break the law, you're going to obviously use that law to your advantage. And that's exactly what he does over and over. It's what he does all 3 times. Jesus answered him, "It is written, man does not live by bread alone." And we'll unpack this a little more. We did last week as well. But, when we look at this verse, this is what Yahweh used to justify starving the Hebrews. We'll get back to this in the mind map. Then the devil led him up to a high place and showed him in a flash all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, "To you I will grant this whole realm and the glory that goes along with it. For it has been relinquished to me, and I can give it to anyone I wish. So then if you will worship me, all this will be yours." Jesus answered him, "It is written, you are to worship the Lord your God and serve him only." And this refers to Yahweh. And again, my critics will say, wait, but he's saying here he is going to worship Yahweh. Yes, that's a requirement of the law. This is like the big context point that my critics ignore. They have to ignore it. Jesus came to fulfill the law. He is in full submission to Yahweh. Right? Or he can't fulfill the law. That's the whole point. So what's going on here? We'll get to it in a second. But we did cover some of this last week. Then the devil brought him to Jerusalem and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. Whose temple? Yahweh's temple. Why? Why is the devil now on hallowed ground? Why is the devil now at Yahweh's temple? How does that make any sense? If it's not Yahweh. And said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you. And with their hands," I'm sorry, I'm kind of giggling because I know all the backstory here. We'll get to it. It's so interesting what the interplay here, like everything that's going on. Sometimes, as I'm digging into this, I thought to myself, has anyone really unpacked this whole discourse before? Because as you start to peel away all the layers, as you start to really understand what is going on here, you're left with only one conclusion. This is Yahweh. It can't not be Yahweh. It's not possible for it to be anyone but Yahweh. He's the only one that can administer these tests. And with their hands, they will lift you up so that you will not strike your foot against the stone. So Yahweh's testing him here, jump off, because Yahweh, I will send my angels to protect you, right? Yeah. And there's so much there, including the part that's missing from that, which Yahweh stops short of quoting the rest of this, which is from Psalm 91. And that is very revealing, and that's going to be a little challenging for some people to accept. Jesus answered him, "It is said, you are not to put the Lord your God, Yahweh, to the test." So when the devil had completed every temptation, he departed from him until a more opportune time. And this is from Luke 4, and this is paralleled in Matthew 4. And in the ending in Matthew 4, Jesus calls him Satan. Okay. So we get back to this. The structure of the temptation narrative. The location is in the wilderness. The wilderness is not symbolic. I need a drink here. It is the courtroom where Yahweh tested Israel with law, manner, and punishment. Jesus is not led there for solitude, but to stand trial. It is where Israel failed, Moses was murdered, and covenant justice was enforced. The same testing ground now becomes the setting for Jesus' legal confrontation. The setting is immediately after baptism. The temptation follows the Father's declaration at Jesus' baptism, "You are my son." The trial that follows is not a coincidence. It is a legal summons. The tester challenges that identity. The question is not whether Jesus believes it, but whether he will act on it and under whose authority. So you can have a father and obey your father and still be submitted to Yahweh's law, be submitted to Yahweh. That's how every Hebrew male was. They had a father. They obeyed their father. That's even part of the law. Okay? I'm going to turn this heater off. You might hear it talking here. This controller for my heater talks. But is he going to use his father's power here to provide sustenance for himself? Or is he going to submit himself fully to Yahweh instead? This is very important. He has to obey his father. He's doing his father's works, but he has to be submitted to Yahweh's law. The role of the Holy Spirit drives Jesus into the test. Abba's Spirit leads Jesus into the wilderness to be tested. It is not an ambush. It is not a trap. It is a sanctioned trial. The Holy Spirit delivers him to the courtroom. The test is real, permitted by the Father, and carried out under covenant terms. The location and purpose are both deliberate. The legal setting, a courtroom, not a battlefield. There is no combat in the temptation, no exorcism, no shouting. Only offers, terms, and citations. Jesus responds with Torah, not power. He acts like a defendant answering a legal charge. This is not spiritual warfare. It is legal examination, and Jesus stays within the boundaries of the courtroom. Sorry for more noise. The tester is unnamed in the text. The Gospels never named the tester in the dialogue. The tester speaks with authority, quotes Torah, and behaves like Yahweh. The reader is meant to recognize him not by title, but by the role he plays in covenant history. Jesus never rebukes or casts out the tester. Jesus rebukes demons all through his ministry. He silences them, names them, and drives them out, but not here. In the temptation, he never says, "Get behind me." He never calls the tester a liar. He simply responds with law. This is how Jesus handles authority, not deception. Jesus answers using Torah, not spiritual warfare. Jesus answers all three tests with Deuteronomy. No miracles, no angelic help, no dramatic acts. Just precise legal replies. This is not emotional reaction. It is a covenant defense, and the covenant he is quoting comes from Yahweh. So the test is real, not symbolic. We've been taught it's symbolic. No, it's not. Jesus is not imagining these events. He is truly hungry. He is shown real kingdoms. He is placed at the temple. These are not metaphors. The tests are real because the offers are real, and the only one who can make such offers is the one who possesses legal dominion. And that is Yahweh.
Thanks for using. I wish you a safe journey.
My crazy heater. So, we have looked at the text. We've kind of looked at a bit of intro there to set context. Let's take a look at this now. Yahweh's covenant offer at Sinai. A conditional legal contract is established, not a relationship of trust. In Exodus 19, Yahweh declares the terms of his covenant to Moses and instructs him to deliver it to the people, and the offer is clear. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This is not a relationship based on love or personal trust. It is a contract. The promise of privilege is conditional. The terms are legal. Yahweh is presenting himself as a commanding authority, demanding obedience in exchange for national privilege. The people accept the deal. And Exodus 19 records their reply. They say, "All that Yahweh has spoken, we will do." Which, of course, they didn't, because you can't, because it was designed that way. Like sometimes you see this thing floating around where people will say, the system isn't broken. It was designed this way. Right. Same thing. This is legal consent. The covenant is now binding. There is no ambiguity about the structure. Reward will follow obedience. Punishment will follow failure. The contract is ratified with blood. In Exodus 24, Moses reads the book of the covenant aloud, and the people say again, "All that Yahweh has said we will do." Then Moses sprinkles the blood on them and says, "This is the blood of the covenant that Yahweh has made with you." From this moment, Israel is no longer a people traveling freely. They are a nation under a binding contract, one authored, administered, and enforced by Yahweh. No one else. Just Yahweh. So, hunger in the test of provision. So let's look at this first test. Yahweh uses hunger to initiate testing immediately after covenant agreement. After Israel agrees to the covenant at Sinai, the first recorded trial comes in the form of hunger. In Exodus 16, the people complain that they have no food. And they say, "If only we had died by Yahweh's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. This was just 6 weeks after they left Egypt. They knew. They knew what was going on. But those that opened their mouth with these things didn't live long. The complaint is not just grumbling, it is the beginning of the covenant's enforcement. Yahweh responds, but not with correction. He responds with a test. In Exodus 16:4, Yahweh says, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. Everything is a test to Yahweh. So the hunger is engineered. The manner is conditional. The test is structured to reveal whether the people will obey the exact terms. There is no mention of trust or relationship, only compliance. This becomes a legal precedent in Deuteronomy 8, which reflects on this event explicitly. Remember how Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way into the wilderness these 40 years to humble and test you. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna to teach you that man does not live on bread alone. Click, click. But on every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. Are you starting to see the connection? So Yahweh is testing Jesus with bread. And what does Yahweh say to the Hebrews? Why he's testing them? To teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. How does Jesus respond when he's being tested by Yahweh? With hunger, just like they were? With Yahweh's own words. This verse is not philosophical, it is legal commentary. Hunger was Yahweh's chosen tool for initiating covenant enforcement. It was not a punishment. It was a test structured to demand trust under strict, measurable terms. This is the framework Jesus steps into in the first test in the wilderness. His hunger is not symbolic. It is legal. And his response, quoting Deuteronomy 8:3, is not devotional, it is judicial. Yahweh is trying to trap him. Jesus throws his own words back in his face. Okay, so the next one. Well, let's talk about a little bit more about this, Massah and the test of trust. Yahweh responds to Israel's demand for proof with legal condemnation, turning trust into a permanent test case. In Exodus 17, the people arrive at Rephidim and find no water. Why is Yahweh leading them to a place with no water? They immediately quarrel with Moses and say, "Give us water to drink." Moses replies, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put Yahweh to the test?" Here the roles appear reversed. The people demand that Yahweh act. They are testing whether he will keep his promises. But Yahweh sees this as rebellion. The issue is not just thirst, it is accusation. They are putting Yahweh on trial, and he does not tolerate it. In Exodus 17, the site is named Massah and Meribah. Because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested Yahweh, saying, "Is Yahweh among us or not?" So this word Massah means to test. This moment becomes a fixed point of legal shame in Israel's covenant history. Yahweh gives them water, but also a mark. The name itself, Massah, means testing and quarreling. Later in Deuteronomy 6, Yahweh issues a command. Do not test Yahweh your God as you did at Massah. That line becomes legally binding. Massah is now precedent. It is cited as the proper boundary of covenant trust. Testing Yahweh is forbidden. The command is absolute. And it reappears again in the mouth of Jesus. So a lot of the reason we don't understand what Jesus is saying, and this has kind of been my vein of teaching now for over 2 years, is that we don't have the context of the Exodus. And if we don't have the context of the Exodus, we won't understand what Jesus is talking about a lot of the time, because he refers to the Exodus in his parables constantly, like the Good Father discourse, where we find in Luke 11 and Matthew 6, we see Jesus giving the Lord's Prayer, which steps through all of the actions of Yahweh and the Hebrews during the Exodus. Then it continues with these other stories that are all based on the Exodus. Everything relates back to the Exodus. So if you don't understand the Exodus, if you don't have any memory, if you can't recall what is happening in the Exodus as you're reading Jesus' words, you're going to miss the essential context that tells you what Jesus is trying to say. You have to know what happened during the Exodus. And our table talk studies that we started recording, I don't know, just over a year ago, steps through all of the essential parts of the Exodus. And so I would encourage you to go through those if you haven't. You can read the whole Torah if you want. That's probably a good idea. I think a lot of Christians start having a lot of questions when they start reading through Torah and see what Yahweh's really like. It's probably a good thing to do. But if you want a shortcut, then you can go through my videos where we go through the important parts of the Exodus. When the tester challenges Jesus to throw himself down from the temple, Jesus replies with Deuteronomy 6, "You shall not test the Lord your God." Jesus is invoking Massah law, not general piety. The temptation at the temple is a replay of Massah. The logic is the same. Demand a miracle to prove the presence of Yahweh. Jesus refuses. He will not participate in a test that Yahweh once condemned. But how does he get out of it, right? Because he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, It's like, hang on, he's telling me to jump, or suggesting I jump anyway. It wasn't a command. And Jesus replies, no, you can't test Yahweh. Massah proves that Yahweh was once tested and hated it. In the wilderness, he now tries to reverse roles. Yahweh tests Jesus to entice Jesus to test him. But Jesus will not play either part. Now, I mean, you've got to go back and read through the text of this story to really see just like what is going on here. And the more you do, the more you're going to unpack. This passage is here to tell us who the devil is, who Satan is, who the tester is. I don't think it's ambiguous in any way. I think it's absolutely crystal clear. Jesus is telling us that Yahweh is the one testing him. The whole story tells us that. The problem is we've been told other stories, cover stories. In fact, you'll find that most people don't teach on this. You're unlikely to go to church for 10 years and ever hear a sermon on this. You might hear it mentioned. They might pull a little fragment out here or there. But when you start to step through this whole thing, you start to see that this is a courtroom scene where You've got an accuser, a judge, who is trying to pin down the defendant and trying to get the defendant to break his law. And that's just crystal clear. And the more you read this and the more you understand, you go back and look at the Old Testament references to what's going on here, the more you'll see that is simply the case. It's very, very explicit. Canaan and the test of obedience. The land is not given freely. Yahweh makes it the reward for total covenant submission. The promise of land is central to Yahweh's covenant, but it is never unconditional. In Exodus 23, Yahweh lays out a legal sequence for how Israel will receive Canaan. And he says, if you listen carefully to what he says, Yahweh, and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies. Oh, that sounds just like Jesus. Sarcasm. I will wipe them out. Oh, that's right. That's what Jesus did. He wiped them all out, right? That's what his disciples thought he was going to do. Remember, the disciples didn't even understand Jesus' mission moments before he left. At least some of them, because right at the ascension of Jesus, literally seconds before Jesus left, his disciples are asking him, Lord, is now the time when you're going to restore the kingdom? And what they meant by that is, are you now going to lead an insurgency and overthrow the Roman Empire and restore these lands to us? We've got to be careful. We need to have context when we're reading anything in the text. We've got to understand that the disciples didn't know what was going on. And we don't neither. That's why we really have to dig in to find out. So, continuing here, I will wipe them out. You must not bow down to their gods. And this is important. You must not bow down to their gods. This is part of this test. This third test. Second test, sorry. Worship Yahweh your God, and his blessing will be on your food and water. Okay. Actually, it is the second test a third test if you're reading it in Matthew. Matthew and Luke switch the two final tests in position, and one comes before the other. So the pattern is legal, not relational. Yahweh offers conquest in exchange for obedience. The land is the prize for full compliance. Any deviation from worship structure, cultural assimilation, or covenant terms will result in punishment or delay. In Deuteronomy 11, this logic is reaffirmed. If you carefully observe all these commands, then Yahweh will drive out all these nations before you, and you will dispossess nations larger and stronger than you. Yeah, it sounds just like Jesus. The land is not inherited. It is not given as a birthright. It is a contractually offered dominion. The test is not faith, it is obedience. If they serve Yahweh as Lord, they will gain the kingdoms. Okay? In Deuteronomy 28, this logic is pushed to its extreme. Obedience brings national exaltation. Disobedience brings famine, defeat, disease, and exile. The land is the central reward in this structure. This is the framework that reappears in the second test Jesus faces in the wilderness. He has shown all the kingdoms of the world. He has offered them. The tester is not inventing this deal. He is repeating Yahweh's ancient formula. Interesting. The trap in this test is layered. If Jesus accepts the offer, he will gain the kingdoms, the very thing that he has come for, right? But only by leading all the nations to worship him instead of Yahweh. Remember the offer. I will give you the land and all the glory that goes along with it. And we see that here. So, get my cursor on the right screen. So to you I will grant this whole realm and the glory that goes along with it. Okay, so what happens then if Jesus accepts Yahweh's offer? He will gain the kingdoms, but only by leading all the nations to worship him instead of Yahweh. That would place Jesus in the position of making others break the very law he came to fulfill. And in doing so, he would violate it himself. This is the temptation. This is the test. Or you can have all of this, really, and the glory that comes with it. Oh, really? And so they'll all worship me instead of you? Wait, well, that has implications. The result is predetermined. Yahweh has already shown what happens to those he promises the land to. He denies them entry or kills them outright, which is the very next thing he tries to do, by the way. Moses saw the land and died and was murdered by Yahweh himself. Jesus sees the kingdoms and refuses them, choosing to simply worship Yahweh without enticement. If you've come to fulfill the law, you've come to fulfill the law. You're not going to be sidetracked into quick gains. You have a mission from your Father to fulfill. And that mission is to fulfill Yahweh's law, not to be tricked into breaking it. Well, you can have everything, yes, but I'll break the law in doing so. And so Jesus' response here is, no, I just worship you. I'm not accepting the stuff. We're not going to have the whole world worshiping me and have me break the law. So, next section, Moses and the death sentence at Nebo. Even covenant loyalty is no protection from the terms. The law does not forgive. Not even Moses, the right-hand man of Yahweh, is exempt. In Numbers 20, Moses is instructed by Yahweh to speak to the rock so that water will flow for the people. But Moses, frustrated, strikes the rock twice. The water comes out, the people drink, but Yahweh is not pleased because you tapped the rock, which he told them to do earlier, right? This is the second time that's being referenced here. The first time Yahweh said to strike the rock with his stick. But now he does it a second time. So, I didn't say to do that. Okay, Mr. Pedantic. He says to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land I give them. Now, if you to break this down a little bit in the Hebrew, you'll see that what Yahweh's actually saying here is because you embarrassed me in front of everybody. A lot of pride, a lot of arrogance. There is no appeal, no negotiation. The sentence is final. This is not relationship. This is judgment. In Deuteronomy 32, Yahweh repeats the charge to them. This is because both of you broke faith with me at the waters of Meribah, Kadesh. Therefore, you will see the land only from a distance. You will not enter the land I am giving the people of Israel. So here's the precedent. Yahweh's offering all this to Jesus, and Jesus is remembering this and going, yeah, sure, bro. I know what happens next. Moses is taken to Mount Nebo in Deuteronomy 34. He sees the land. He is not allowed to enter it. He dies at the hands of Yahweh. He is murdered by Yahweh. Yahweh himself buries him, and no one knows where. This is the end of the law's most faithful servant. So what's he going to do with Jesus? Offer him the land, and then what? Well, you're a lawbreaker now, so I'm just going to kill you now, just like you did with Moses. It's just a whole repeat of all of this. The temptation story is a repeat of Yahweh's testing the Hebrews in the Exodus in the wilderness. This is just a repeat. One moment of improper action and he is disqualified. Yahweh calls this justice, but the picture is clear. Even Moses dies under the curse of the covenant. And if Jesus dies under the curse of the covenant, what happens? Mission failure. He can die, but not after having broken the law. He has to completely obey the law. He has to be completely submitted to Yahweh. This moment becomes a prophetic reference point. In the second test of the temptation, Jesus is also shown the land, not just Canaan, but the kingdoms of the world. Oh, I should have changed the color on this. It picks the colors by default, and then I usually get in and change it. I don't like the pink. But anyway, tonight we've got pink. The wilderness as legal ground. The wilderness is not a place of discovery. It is the courtroom where the covenant is enforced. From the moment Israel leaves Egypt, the wilderness becomes a place of constant legal activity. Yahweh uses it to test, judge, and discipline. It is where the covenant is enacted, not merely remembered. In Exodus 15 through 17, Yahweh immediately begins testing the people with non-potable water and hunger. Each moment is treated not as a logistical problem, but as a legal question. Will they obey? Will they trust? Will they pass? And of course, nobody does. Not even Moses. In Deuteronomy 8, the wilderness is explicitly called a test environment. Remember how Yahweh, your Elohim, led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commandments. Everything is a test. This is not a metaphor. It is a summary of Yahweh's legal approach to covenant formation. The wilderness is where obedience is measured, trust is demanded, and failure is punished. Yahweh describes it again in Deuteronomy 29 as a controlled environment, where he says, during the 40 years that I led you through the wilderness, your clothes did not wear out. I did this so that you might know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim. This is surveillance under provision, not grace, but monitoring. Every provision is a test. Every failure is a record. You know, why did the manna go bad overnight? Because you can't pack it and leave. You don't have anything else. So what do? You can't leave, you're trapped. When Jesus is led into the wilderness, it is not for solitude, it is for examination. The location is not incidental, it is essential. This is the ground where the first covenant was tested and failed, and now Jesus is brought to that same courtroom to face the same judge. Israel's repeated failures. The covenant was not broken once, it was broken continually. The people could not survive the system. From the moment they enter the wilderness, Israel fails to meet Yahweh's terms. The testing is relentless and the results are consistent. Each episode of need becomes a legal failure. In Exodus 16, they gather too much manna. In Exodus 17, they demand water. Yahweh is constantly enraged. He sends fire, plague, and punishment. Moses intercedes, but the system never relents. In Numbers 11, the people complain again. Yahweh sends fire and consumes some of the camp. In Numbers 14, they refuse to enter the land. Yahweh sentences that entire generation to death in the wilderness. In Numbers 21, they complain again, and Yahweh sends venomous snakes. This is not incidental behavior. It is systematic rebellion against a covenant that demands perfect trust, immediate obedience, and unwavering loyalty. The system isn't broken. It was designed this way. The pattern never breaks. Even after repeated acts of deliverance, the people falter again and again. In Psalm 95, this history becomes part of Israel's liturgy. Do not harden your hearts, as at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness. For 40 years I loathed that generation. They shall never enter my rest. The covenant did not forgive, it recorded. It did not heal, it judged. Israel's repeated failure reveals not merely human weakness, but the structural inflexibility of the system itself. This is the courtroom Jesus walks into, and he walks in alone. Next, the unresolved contract. The covenant was never fulfilled. The law remained in force. The trial was not concluded. You could say it was paused. By the end of the Torah, the people had failed to keep Yahweh's covenant. The land is not fully conquered. The law is not fully obeyed. The hearts of the people are still hard. Even Moses dies under judgment. In Deuteronomy 31, Moses says, I know how rebellious and stiff-necked you are. If you have been rebellious against Yahweh while I am still alive and with you, how much more will you rebel after I die? In Deuteronomy 32, he says plainly, they are corrupt and not as children. To their shame, they are a warped and crooked generation. They can't follow this law. The system is not broken. It's designed this way. Yahweh's solution is not grace. It is curse. In Deuteronomy 28, he outlines in detail what will happen if they fail, and every consequence is judicial: disease, defeat, famine, captivity, and death. No clause offers escape through mercy. No clause offers transformation. There is no plan B, only Yahweh's law. By the end of Deuteronomy, the covenant is still active. The contract is still binding. The law remains unfulfilled. The nations remain in darkness. The courtroom has not been closed, it has been adjourned. When Jesus appears at the Jordan, he is not entering a new chapter. He is entering an ongoing legal process. The law is still on the table. The judge is still seated. The verdict is still unfinished. And so Jesus enters the wilderness, the same wilderness, to face the same tester, under the same contract, but this time the outcome will not be the same. So, you start to see, once you begin gathering more context, what's really going on in this passage. Here, Yahweh is trying to see if Jesus will actually submit to his law. Now, there's so much more to talk about here, but time is getting on. This is going to be in the book. This will be greatly expanded. And as you've already seen, the book is going to be free. You can read it online. We're developing a terrific website where you will be able to read this even better than Kindle or anything like that. You'll be able to have dark mode. You'll have multiple different languages that you can just select from and just read it totally free. I'm not even putting an email sign up there at all. There's no paywall. You don't have to pay. You don't even have to provide an email. We will ask for it while you're reading, but it's just a request. You don't have to. The printed version will be available, and you can purchase it if you want, or you can listen to it on Audible. But I want to make this available to everybody for free. That's really, really important because the gospel is free, not cheap. So I've had a few people, my friends, really kind of question my judgment. Sorry, this thing, I'm not. Okay, let's do this. Really question my judgment on making it totally free. One of my good friends today said, but like, how are you going to make any money? It's not about the money. This temptation story will be in the book, and it will be in great detail, because this is one of the center points of everything Jesus talked about. This is setting the stage. It is providing the context for many things Jesus spoke about later. So the temptation story will never be seen the same way again. Now, remember, we go back to Augustine and we can see that, well, Augustine understood this was a parallel of Yahweh testing the Hebrews during the Exodus. That is what is happening. But Augustine, along with the other church fathers, believed Yahweh is the Father, so he can't possibly be the tester. But as you begin to read through the text, as I said, it doesn't take long. How long is it going to take you to read this realistically? Like the whole thing is going to take you 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. So if you come and you read this 10 times, and then you get a notepad and paper and you start to really pull this all apart yourself, right? I love to teach, but there's nothing that replaces you studying for your own self. And you will start to see all of these tests don't even become valid unless Yahweh is the one administering the test. Let's just go back over them briefly again. Here, when we're talking about provision of bread, well, if it's not Yahweh, Jesus could have just produced bread. That wouldn't break the law. There's no law against making bread. It's only going to be a covenant violation if Yahweh himself is the one testing you to create bread. We know Jesus can create bread. He did it later on for thousands and thousands of people who were traveling with him in the wilderness, and they didn't even need to ask. He just provided, right? But unless Yahweh is the one testing Jesus here rather, then you're not breaking the law if you make bread. Anybody can make bread. Everybody makes bread. No one's breaking the law by making bread. Unless the one who is talking to you and testing you is Yahweh himself, which is why he quotes Yahweh's words back in his face and says, wait a minute, this hunger test you put them through, you told them that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from your mouth. Oh, and that's how Jesus responds. Then he's offered the kingdoms and the glory that comes along with it. So now Jesus would become the God of this world. Everyone would be worshiping Jesus. And it's a test. Do you need stuff to worship me? Or will you just do it? And of course, Jesus says, I will just do it. You are to worship the Lord your God, here talking about Yahweh, your Elohim, and serve him only. You don't need a condition. You don't need a gift. You're just going to do what is required under the law. Yahweh doesn't need to entice you to worship him. Your worship must be there because it is the law. And then in the third one, and maybe we'll do another study because there's a lot going on here and we really need to unpack this. I'm not going to talk about what it talks about here, but I will publish it soon. A lot of the portions of the book are being published already under the articles tab on my X account. So you can go there and start to read. Some of those articles are actually in the book. Now, though, they're final drafts, or some of them are not even final drafts. They're drafts, so they might be a little bit different when they finally hit the book. But you'll get an idea of the content that's going to be in the book. And again, of course, it's free for you to go read right now. So, there's something else here. Maybe we'll talk about it in the future. I don't even want to mention what it is because it's kind of a can of worms. But there's a position that I've been teaching for a long time, like in Two Gardens and a Snake. And what is going on here actually backs that up. But it will take us at least half an hour to unpack, so we're not going to do it this evening. But again here, the test is only valid if Yahweh is the tester. If somebody is making this claim, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and with your hands, their hands, they will lift you up so that you will not strike your foot against the stone. The only one who can make this claim is Yahweh. A stand-in can't make this claim. So that's cool, bro, thanks, but Yahweh's not here right now. Only Yahweh can make this claim. And how does Jesus get out of it? Like, he's being enticed to throw himself off and prove his obedience to Yahweh. But of course, Yahweh is going to do exactly what he did with Moses, kill him. He's just going to let him fall to the ground. Crush him. Crush him. And so then Jesus replies, you are not to put the Lord your God, Yahweh your Elohim, to the test. Oh, and that's how he gets out of it. He is being positioned in a way, in a trap with the law. And how does he get out of each of these traps? By citing Yahweh's own law back in his face. I want you to take this study very seriously. There's much more here. I think we've shown with last week and this week, looking at different angles, that the depth of this passage is incredible. And you are going to spend a long time unpacking everything that is here. And of course, I'm going to do that and put it into the book. So with that said, let's look at the book. This book has been years in the making, and I'm really excited to release it. I'm excited to release it for free. I hope people will purchase a printed copy or an Audible copy. That would be wonderful. But you don't have to. There is no paywall. There's no email wall. It will simply be go to the website and begin to read it. That's it. And that's the way I want it to be. Not only that, but I've already chosen the titles for the second and the third book. I've decided on the content, but not the title yet. And I will release a book as often as possible. I was thinking I would release a book once a year, but I started doing this a few months ago, and I've got to say that I am totally surprised that I just love to write. I love to, because when you write it all out, you gain so much clarity that you don't get just from doing a mind map. Because in the mind maps, we're kind of brief in what we're doing, but when you're writing it long form, you need to go into a lot more detail right? I provide kind of commentary as we go along to fill in some of the gaps, but there won't be any gaps in something that's written long form because you have to explain it all. And in doing that, I'm enjoying it so incredibly much. So this book will release November 5, but I don't think you'll be waiting till November 5 for the next one. I would say maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months, something like that. But I'm just going to keep writing. And all of my books will be free. They will be the same as this. Free to read online, in multiple languages, no paywall, no email wall. Just completely free to read online. Perfectly tailored to your mobile device. It'll look really great. And so those will be coming soon as well. But for now, let's get into the title. What is this book called? Let's see if I'm on the right screen here. What is the title of this book? It is called The God Wrestler, Letters from a Modern Heretic. The God Wrestler, Letters from a Modern Heretic. And of course, you may already realize that this phrase is my name, Israel. Israel means the God Wrestler. So you can go right now to thegodwrestler.com and you can see the book there and you can sign up to be notified of updates and when it's released and so forth at the website. Now, the cover. Here it is. The God Wrestler, Letters from a Modern Heretic. Get that as big as I can on screen. So, November 5, I'm totally on schedule at this point. I don't see any delay. I am considering delaying the printing maybe a month. We'll see, but it will be available online for you to read November 5, around midday. And I'm excited, and I hope you're excited too. But go right now to, a bit of a rendering thing there, to thegodwrestler.com and sign up there, and you'll be notified of future updates and things that are going on, excerpts from the book that will be released as they already are being released. And it'll be good just to be able to stay in touch with you via email. So this is an email list that requires confirmation, and that confirmation usually goes to your spam folder, even though it's MailChimp, which is surprising, but a lot of people have had it go through to their spam folder. So go to thegodwrestler.com, put your name and email in there, and click notify me, and we'll keep you in touch with everything that's going on. All right. It's an exciting time for me. I'm excited to bring you this content in long form and to be able to provide a way for you to be able to share this content with people very, very easily. You're just going to tell them to go to thegodwrestler.com and they can read it. And we're going to be printing business card size cards that have the title on one side and a QR code on the other. So you can hand these out to people and they can just open it up right on their phone. Okay. Of course, if you want to support me financially, that would be great. All these people scrolling across the bottom of the screen have chosen to do that. I appreciate every single one of you. You can join them by going to andersondiscoveries.com here. You can subscribe to the Founders Club. We have a private group on Telegram. You get my personal phone number. You can text me and call me. If you just want to make a one-off gift, you can do that as well. And these people are the reason why I can write a book like this and make it available for free. I'm not in it for the money, obviously, because I would probably sell a whole bunch if I wasn't making it for free, but that's okay. That really is okay. Store for yourselves riches in heaven. So thanks for joining me tonight. I appreciate every single one of you. And I hope every single one of you will sign up to the Founders Club to continue to enable me to do this. I love you. I appreciate you. You have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.